live. Might as well we'll just dive in and start going. So we're just gonna have a fun conversation. You ready?
Yeah, I know you, so this is
All right. Well, Mohammed, welcome, man. I appreciate you joining me for a conversation today.
for sure always good to see you.
Yeah. So rich life is about, what is meaningful to you? What is meaningful to me? What's meaningful to all of us? I think sometimes in society, here's what you should care about. Here's what success is. Climb this ladder, do this thing, get good grades, whatever it is. And I think it's really helpful. It's been on my journey to learn from other people that are ahead of me and learn from others' paths in terms of what was most important for them.
Yep.
And so can't wait to kind of hang out in some of that space with you today. Appreciate knowing you for all these years. I respect you greatly. I love how you live your life. I love the husband that you are, the father that you are, the businessman that you are, the friend that you are. And I don't know, man. It's just I think about you. I think about somebody that's promoting good things. And so just gonna excited to talk to you about what's behind that, what's been part of your past, part of your path today.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's get into it.
All right, so we're going to start with your professional path, your work path, and it's taken some turns as most of ours have, and that's what I love is everyone's is unique, and I love learning and unpacking it because it's kind of cool to see what we can learn from one another. So obviously, like a very successful career in sports. Let's start. Take me back. Like when did it click in for you? Like, this is something I think I want to do for at much higher levels. Like, when did that really click for you?
It's fascinating. I guess I'll dive all the way back. Both my parents were athletes. They're Liberian, and so they
Yep.
immigrated to America in the early 80s. Professional sports really wasn't a thing in Africa in that time. And so coming over to America, having a kid, this idea of professional athlete just doesn't even resonate.
Mm,
And so I can't take credit for being an athlete. That was just kind of given to me and started to work hard at it, but more on the basketball side. I'm from North Carolina, so you get,
yep.
your Carolina, your Duke, your Wake Forest, all that good stuff. I had a friend who one summer he came back 6'5", 6'6", and I wasn't that tall. So I started to shift gears from basketball to football. It was really fortunate to have a guy named Tommy Knotts as my head coach. He's won 15 state championships on the high school level. And when you're under a person like that, you're developing the
Mm,
right skill sets, and
mm,
it starts to become real where you can see what the future may hold. And that next step is college. I get to
mm.
college and a phenomenal team here, Coach Rick leading it, great athletes. You see the first draft class, and that's when it clicks to say, now I understand what this thing that looks, mythical actually is. And so fortunately, Georgia
Yeah,
was a great experience and got a chance to get drafted second round by the Cleveland Browns.
yeah, man. So I love the idea. It's interesting how many people's stories, not all of them, but a lot of them have somebody that like spoke into it at a certain level, or a great way of accelerating your path is to be under a mentor, be under somebody that's doing the thing, or be under a coach that's teaching the thing, doing it at a high standard, at a high level, kind of knows how to get things done in the best of ways, and is willing to kind of show you the ropes. And it sounds like you had somebody that kind of helped take you to a whole nother guild through that experience.
Yeah, for a lot of people, uh, you don't need motivation. You wake up motivated. I don't really need anyone to give me a pep talk.
Mm,
What we need is more tactical insights of how do I use these efforts? How do I use this energy in the right way? And so that's what happened for me, where you get a person that is trying to do better, but they don't know what they're doing. And so
mm,
having someone that can kind of show you the ropes is very helpful. And I think that's the deciding factor in a lot of people who are, wired to go, whether they have good mentorship or not. Ability is just a slice of the equation. It's the insights of how to use those abilities in the right way that I think
mm.
separate people and the ability to act on whatever insights you're receiving.
So part of that, I think you're kind of just alluded to it. It sounds like you had an engine, like an
Mhm.
engine like that, to go get it, go after it, get it done. Like, let's see what can happen. I mean, is that how you describe yourself? Is that something that you see within yourself? And have you always had that, or did it kind of come in at a certain point?
The love of to compete. We were talking about it earlier. If there's something that I am competing at, I'm all in. If you were to
Mm,
say, hey, we need to make this call happen at 2:30 in the morning. You just wake up and you do it. It's just kind of the
Mm,
athlete where it doesn't really matter what the circumstance is. It's you have an objective, you go hunt your objective down, and you kind of like that, honestly. It kind of charges me up when there's something that I'm going after, and the ability to just be focused and be comfortable being uncomfortable. I think a lot of people say, and you're expecting a reward on the outside of that because you're putting the work in. It's not like a false expectation.
yeah.
It's I'm putting the work in to get this result. And we sometimes as athletes we kind of live in the realm of it's not possible, and then you turn the
Mm,
impossible into possible a lot of times, and sometimes
mm.
it's good, sometimes it's bad.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that everything was impossible before it was done, right? Or everything has been done started as an idea or as an imagination, you know?
For sure.
Um, so was there a certain point that you looked up and said, "Hey, I'm actually putting in more time, more effort"? Like when you started comparing, maybe there's some other guys doing it the same way at a high level, or did it kind of just come naturally? And honestly, maybe until a little bit later that you really started to kind of see your gifting and really apply yourself more. How was that journey with kind of giving it your very best?
There's so many different forms of intelligence, there's so many different forms of ability, and I think the sooner a person can almost not only understand their abilities, but like play and practice their abilities at the same time. And so sports,
Mm,
for example, you can go out and you can just play, and you're developing these skill sets at a young age. And over time, you realize that you're making progress, and then you work harder to develop these skill sets some more. And so you could see it as a kid for me. But the other side of that is when you have immigrant parents that they stress education as well, possibility of sports. You don't want to put your eggs in all in one basket is the same, quote
yeah,
unquote. But as I started to progress, you get a little taller, you get a little faster, you get a little stronger, you work a little harder when you have the opportunity to be guided, how coachable you are. And so all those things started to come around. And as you're starting to come into your own, I started to realize that, hey, nothing's guaranteed, but if I continue to work, I'll have a shot. What that means, whether it's going to college, D1, D2, D3, I'll have a shot to do something
yeah.
to get to the next level. And that's all you can hope for.
But was there a difference in your actual work ethic, or was it? Or, I mean, versus some of your other teammates, or you feel like it was pretty much the same? It was just some of these other things in terms of the time you spent there was just more effective, or did you really have to kind of work at it extra early on, or just kind of?
I think there's a combination of both. And that's why I think it's one, understanding, where am I gifted at? If
Yeah.
size being a little different, motor being a little bit different, maybe the work doesn't pay off. But for me, I think we spoke earlier, being very competitive, whatever you're doing, I think you should do it at the highest level. When we are working out, or when you do make a mistake, are you going to put the extra reps in? When you have a weakness, are you going to try to close that weakness? When you don't do something well, do you try to figure out what to
Mm.
do? Are you accountable to your actions and taking ownership of your journey? And so all those things, I think I was developed at a young age.
Yeah.
I think they still carry to this day.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I wonder what role confidence played in that for you. I mean, was it kind of an uncovering of your confidence at the same time the skill was coming along? Is it kind of like a journey with the skill, journey with the opportunities, that confidence just kind of get stronger and stronger through over time?
That's a really good question. You know me, so I'm more laid back in nature, more quiet in nature. And ideally, I wouldn't choose to be in front of like 90,000 people doing anything. But what happens is you rep these things so much in practice that it becomes
Mm,
muscle memory to a certain extent. And I
yeah.
think that's why practice and competing really with yourself when nobody's watching allows you to just tune out the noise on the exterior. And so a lot of times if I didn't feel comfortable, it was usually something that I didn't feel like I had got enough practice at versus the ability, if anything.
Mm. Well, it's one of the things that you just highlighted there was the importance of reps, which is if you want to be good at anything, rep it, do it, like do it over, do it. And the saying is, don't do it until you get it right. Do it until you can't get it wrong, right? Because some people will try the thing and, oh, I got it, you know, oh, I shot three threes in a row versus like Steph, his level of just shooting and going so far, and it's hard for him to miss at that point. But the importance of reps, no matter what we do, and I often find sometimes people have low confidence in an area when it's just a childhood example of someone walking, right? A child walking is going to fall, but that doesn't mean the child can't get it. Just about all of them can if they keep at it, right? So, and I think sometimes in our lives we're scared to fall. We're scared to try something and fail, and we don't realize that's just part of the process.
Just part of the process. And I imagine Steph has not imagine, I know for sure Steph has missed thousands and thousands of
Yeah,
shots, but
yeah.
he keeps shooting. And in a case like his, where if you look at his story, he's from North Carolina, and so I'm familiar with them
Mm-hmm.
and his dad being a shooter and him actually letting his dad teach him the proper shooting technique and breaking down,
Right,
like
right.
building up his foundation. I think anyone can learn from that, where
Yeah.
he was a good athlete before, but then to become this ultra elite athlete took the guidance else really just showing him the best way to do something. And it's a blessing when you have that person in your life, and it's a blessing when you actually receive that type of guidance. And I think that's why mentors are so important, to be able to tell you this is
Mm.
how you go about it. You can do what you want, but I'm trying to help you maximize your potential. And those are where the motivation, the hard work, the dedication is just supercharged with this other insight that you get.
Yeah, I think what it was is he was shooting maybe from his waist, and his dad taught him how to have a quicker release. I think if I remember correctly, and it took him a while. And early on, he was playing terrible and whatever. I don't know if it was a year or two or a year and a half or maybe a season, but there was a time period, and it's like, yeah, you need that confidence that what you're doing is the right thing, because you could just go try it on your own, try whatever. So you need the guidance and the confidence of someone that's been there, done that, knows the way, and then you got to sometimes trust the new way in order to get breakthrough, right? Is sometimes you got to be willing. They call it creative destruction, where you take what you're doing, destroy it so that you can create something greater. And that's a great example of that. What have you been repping more recently that you're like, I didn't really know how to do this thing, or I didn't have experience doing this thing, but I've been repping this now, and I'm getting really comfortable at this. I'm getting really confident at this.
A lot of it is just talking to my mentors more and actually being vulnerable and
Mm,
transparent with the things. I think when you transition from sport into business, or you've had success at a high level in one area, understanding that, yeah, it's repeatable, but the same things don't like translate one to one. And so as I get in more complex situations, just saying, hey, this is what I'm facing, this is what I'm dealing with, coach me up on what you're seeing. And that doesn't
yeah.
necessarily mean that you take everything and you're a carbon copy, but you get
Hmm.
insights that you can then filter and make sense for what you're trying to accomplish. And so that's what I've really been focused on, not just trying to do it all my own way, but
Yep.
bringing more voices to the table as the complexity of work changes.
Mm. All right, so let's kind of go back to your story. So you get drafted by the Browns. Now take us through the next few years up till you know some of the things that happened for us to call you Iron Massaquoi and other things. Just kind of tell us your story.
Yes, so the Browns experience was very fascinating. I have two like viewpoints on it. One while there, and now being removed from it. And so you leave Georgia, top 10 program at the time. It's continue to rise now, but you go from a very stable, you know, football program, and then you get to Cleveland, where it's somewhat challenging. I hadn't had
Yeah.
much success, a lot of turnover, ownership change, multiple coaching changes, 7 quarterbacks, 4 years, and it becomes a very frustrating experience where you, it's just a lot of noise around trying to perform. And so as a young athlete, it's mentally it's difficult, physically it's difficult. I dealt with my fair share of injuries, concussions, and so 5 years in, you finally have to retire, and so you have this idea, I'm gonna play 12 years, and this is going to happen, and that's going to happen, and it doesn't map onto that. And so the transition period of an athlete is very challenging,
Mm.
because you devoted something that only 1,700-ish people in the world can do. And now, you're I think I was 29 when I entered the workforce, essentially,
Wow.
and trying to
Wow.
figure out what does that mean. And so I went to Morgan Stanley to, start my career as like a wealth manager. And I would say that was a safe route. It wasn't something I was interested in. It's just not giving myself the space to truly understand what do I want to
Mm,
do. And then you take on the challenge where you go get your licenses, your 7, your 66, your insurance, all that stuff, and you put your head down. But that's not always the best thing to do because you haven't really thought like, what do I want to do? What has
mm,
God given me the ability to do at the highest level? And the thing that changed all that was April of 2017, had an ATV accident where I became an amputee. And really for the first time in life, had to stop and just like reevaluate, not just charging forward of who am I? What am I? What is life now after going through this traumatic situation? And really got me just thinking about change. Change is a big topic that everyone has to go through. It's even more complex when you're dealing with organizations and leaders trying to simplify change, lead through change. And so that change became a blessing in disguise to help organizations go through change. I wouldn't have designed it that way, but God
yeah,
has
for
a
sure.
humor, so you laugh with him and you continue to go.
Well, a couple of things you just glossed over that were significant, and it's interesting sometimes when we hear people's story that we kind of hear. I heard a pastor talking about this recently. We kind of hear about, oh, I just transitioned from the NFL and that was difficult. But like context, you know, Mo had been doing this thing since you were how old?
So I'll give you context. So I was 7 when
Yeah.
I started, 7 or 8, somewhere in there. So you're given 15, 14 years of your life to this,
Hmm.
and you're actually good at it. That's the thing that is even more challenging. Where even with the chaos of our rookie year, ended up leading the team in receiving, and so you're
Mm.
like, okay, I got
Wow.
another year under my belt. I know it's gonna be required of me. I feel really confident going this. I'm putting in the work, and then I get the big concussion that lands on Sports Illustrated, and you're like, God, dog.
Mm.
And then you end up breaking a foot, and then you get more concussions, and then you tear a knee, and you tear a shoulder, and you're just like, oh my God. And so the thing is like when you've actually tried to do the right thing and it's just not going the
Mm.
right way, that can be very frustrating mentally. But the reason why I have multiple perspectives is very difficult and challenging. Had I known what I know now, I once again would have sought out mentorships. And I'll give 2 examples
Mm.
of
Mm.
what I mean by that. 3 examples, really. One, we're playing the Denver Broncos, second game of the season, my rookie year. Champ Bailey's on the other side. This is Hall of Fame Champ Bailey. And he's literally calling out everything I'm gonna do prior to. And he's like literally coaching me up as the game's going on a couple times. And I'm like, this is crazy. And had I known what I know now, I probably would have reached out to Champ and says, hey, you have all
Mm.
this experience, you're first ballot Hall of Famer. Educate me on how to be a better receiver because you know the ins and outs of most of the receivers. Same thing happened. We're playing the Steelers. Hines Ward is on the other side. We're in the same division. And so he's watching the same film with me. Same thing. He's like, hey, you should do this, you should do that. The
Wow.
if I had known now here are 2 Bulldogs that, actually want to see me succeed, I would have reached out to them and started to educate myself. And so it's the understanding of who's actually trying to help, who's lending a hand. It will make your journey easier. And I don't know how history plays out, but for sure with that type of guidance, it would have been tremendously more impactful than me just doing
Mm.
it myself. And so that's the
Mm.
perspective I have now of even when things are difficult, there's individuals that can help you navigate it, who have been through it, have firsthand experience, not like this microwave advice that we sometimes get off of, random sites.
So what you just highlighted there was something that I see a lot. I see a lot, and I think it's really important. Which is, what do you think it is that prevented you from reaching out?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't think it was the awareness to, once again, like just how we glossed over that, not to
Yeah.
gloss
Yeah.
over how impactful this is to have
Yes.
something that literally we would be in our warm-ups. Hines would pull me to the side and say, hey, Bulldog, this is what I'm seeing. Hey, these are things that I want you to be aware of. and you hear it and you're very appreciative
Wow.
of it, but you don't lean in. Some of it's is youth, some of it
Yeah.
is not knowing, some of it is maybe being in your own self where you
Yeah.
think you know more than you know. So it's a combination of all those things.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's what I think too is like take the encouragement is to take the initiative. And maybe you're nervous about reaching out, and maybe you're what if they say no? Maybe like maybe there's some fear in there, but like take the initiative to I mean, ask not like capitalize somebody's time, but like people want to help. They want people to be respectful in the process, but people want to help. You know what I mean? And but not everybody. And so, like you said, you find those that do, and especially those we can accelerate our paths in life in whatever area, being a father, being a husband, being in business, being fit, whatever it is, spiritually, by leaning into those that are ahead of us that have
Yeah.
already been there and done that. We don't have to learn all. I mean, it's kind of a crazy thing, right? As parents, I'm like, this is our first time doing this, and got three kids, right? So I did it three. And by the third, I'm like, man, I'm getting better at this. but like the first one, man, I don't know. I mean, I think I know. I'm asking, but you're going through stuff. How much of life we're going through one time, two times? You know what I mean? You went through your career, right? One time, now you've got another career you're building on. But I think it's like take the initiative to read the book, to seek the counsel, to seek the wisdom. Proverbs says, no matter what you do, get wisdom, seek understanding. In the counsel of many, there is wisdom. Iron sharpens iron, right? And there's just so much call for us to I don't know, put our ego aside or put our fears aside and have a radar. I call it mining for gold. But there's people and books and ideas that are out there that can really be helpful for us.
Yeah, for sure. Some of it I think is the fear of bothering someone. Some of it I think is the
Yeah.
fear of maybe being rejected. But then I think it's we get so busy and we don't think clearly. We're putting out fires and we're being reactive to
Mm,
versus actually slowing down to say, what is the best course of
mm,
action for this particular thing? And once we can kind of get out of our own way of being ultra busy with this thing, that thing, because there's always a thing, the more we can slow that down, the more we can say, you know what, I shouldn't be tackling this all by myself. So and so is the right
yeah.
person to actually run this by. And the insight that you get is so like tactical, it's so spot on of man, this thing I'd be bumping my head against the wall for the next month or so is a 5 minute conversation in and out.
Yeah. It's kind of like busy versus productive.
Exactly.
It's being intentional with our time versus just letting the day kind of take it wherever it's going to take it. It's looking for the great, not just the good, right? And saying no to the good, in order to make space for the great. Prioritizing those things that you are an investment. So maybe being aware of what those types of things are that can be game changers and prioritizing those. The other thing though is just like that's a big deal having the title of being known. So one of the things I talk about in RichWork is the whole of who we are is not just what we do, right? Work is not supposed to be the whole of our identity. But I feel like in some aspects of our society, especially athletes, man, if you try to fight that, it's hard to fight that because all along the way, you're revered for it, you're known for it, you're known as, Mohamed Massaquoi, wide receiver, like whatever, Georgia, high school, pro, Cleveland Browns. And it's such an attachment to your identity, right? In terms of how other people are responding to you. It's like watching that Johnny Manziel documentary, and even though he tried to fight the Johnny football thing, he's like he on one hand he wanted to repel it, but on the other hand it was like it's just this wave taking him almost. It's almost like gravity. So then when that ends, and I draw the analogy, it could be like somebody retiring or selling their business. It could be a stay-at-home parent going back into the workforce, and now they're empty nesters. That's a really big deal, and you've kind of been known for that, and now you're not needed that way anymore. You're not able to do the thing. Like that's a really big deal. And you see a whole lot of mental health issues and others amongst athletes, amongst others, that they go through this process of almost grieving, I would imagine, having not exactly been through it myself, but learned a lot about it from clients and friends and just, learning life. But I mean, is that like some of that your experience? It's really a hard time of kind of adjusting, being known for this thing And also at a time we're trying to figure out what's next.
It's all of the above. You don't, it's what you are. It's not even the notoriety, it's the regimen, it's the thing that you enjoy doing. And so you're trying to figure out what is everything else. Most people that are good at what they do can do what they do for a very long time until they want to retire. And so
Right,
they're a lot
right.
more mature. If you're lucky, in sports, you're mid 30s, which you're still realistically a baby. If you're really lucky, you're Tom Brady and you're 45, but he's probably still has another 40 something years left of life. And so you're trying to figure it out. And what I've realized, it's not a or, it's an and. Like when you're an athlete, you try to shed some of that to become whatever you are next. Oh, I used to play football, now I'm in business. I used to do this thing, now I'm in this one. When in reality, it's a continuation. I used to do this, and now
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the more you can keep what you are versus trying to recreate this new being, that regardless, if I say,
Yeah.
if I don't mention football at all, somebody's going to mention it. And so rather than trying to like change it or prove that I'm smart over here, it's the acknowledgement of that. And, let me carry you over here as well.
Yeah, and something you said that's really important too for those that may have to begin again after whatever career, whatever thing, whatever life stage is. I mean, the positive is you're not going back to when you were 18 to start again. All connections, life wisdom, learning methodologies of work. I mean, there's so much that you learn from 18, pick your date, 18, 22 to 29, that you were starting with a much higher foundation. You weren't going back. You're starting with a much higher foundation of all those things that you learned, and that's what you've now now done. So the other thing, I guess, let's walk through the process of figuring that out, because you kind of went through that pretty fast. But you tried to think. So, what would your counsel be to somebody that's trying to begin again in a different way?
I think it's understanding what you're actually interested in. And I know people are saying follow your passions, and yes and no. You got to actually, have skill or be willing to develop the skill in the area. But directionally, where should you be going? When I went into the finance world, I never really been interested in looking at the markets, never really been interested in that world. Some people love it, but for me, it wasn't the thing that I wanted. Where I have conversations with you and you know exactly what's going on in the markets, you love it. That just wasn't for me. It was more the safe thing to do or the close thing to do at that particular time. If I studied psychology in undergrad, I love performance, I love people, I have a master's in organizational psychology. And so how humans interact with performance is fascinating to me. How people interact through change and being able to understand that is really fascinating to me. And so the more I can understand what I'm interested in, where I want to spend my time and efforts to continue to add value. And sometimes that's nonprofit, sometimes that's in business, sometimes that's your family. It's whatever you slice it up to be. I think moving in that direction, you get clues as to how to improve. It's kind of like sport, where when you start out and you're a kid, you're not ready for the pros, but you get better, you develop more, you learn. It's the same thing when you're transitioning out. You're not going to be the skill level that I was at as an NFL player isn't where I'm starting the skill level as a consultant. It takes time, but you have to be interested in the thing to put the time in to continue to endure the ups and the downs and all that good stuff.
From the time you said, "Hey, I want to go be a consultant," what was that time frame before? All right, I want to go in this direction, but I know I need to get some training, some additional learning, some opportunities, some experience. Like, what was that? Hey, this is the direction one I will go. What did you do? And then, like, to find out, okay, I've got enough reps now to really kind of go out here and start delivering value.
That's a good question. So the accident was 2017, 2018. I started to peek my head out a little bit more. People started to ask me, hey, can you speak on overcoming adversity? Can you speak on change? Can you speak of performing when things aren't well? And so my entry into the world was literally speaking about it in very, very low hanging, stress environment, those type of things. And you start to learn the problem more. And then after you do more speaking around it, then it elevates to, hey, can you do a workshop around this? Kind of work with our executive team on these particular things. So you dig your feet in the water a little bit more, and then you actually get a chance. And so it's not necessarily you start it and then you're doing this
Yeah.
big.
Yeah. Building and gaining momentum and adding things onto it.
You're building real world application, but then in the background, you're starting to understand I have gaps, just like in sports. I need to develop these gaps. And so I didn't feel my business acumen was as sharp as I needed to be. So went to the Harvard Business School. Didn't feel like I understood the world of organizations and psychology. Went back to Georgia to get a master's in organizational psychology. And so it's these things of getting real world understanding where can I develop myself so that I fill these gaps. And I don't know how people approach it, but I'm actively looking for what I'm weak at to go fix that. Because it's not a matter of can I do it? It's a matter that I just haven't done it. And if it's something that I can close, I want to go close that so I can get closer to my potential. And as you learn more, you just make better decisions and you do better and you ask questions better, you add value more, and the scope of things starts to expand. And then you're on a new level where you repeat it all over again of where do I need to develop? Where am I learning? Where am I not learning? Where am I skilled at? And so it's
Hmm.
you evolve versus it just like happening.
So I'm noticing you've said that a couple of times, and you've said it more than I've heard from other people in life, in that it sounds like you're super into evaluation. You're super into looking at your weaknesses and seeing how you can close the gap. I think some people are afraid to look at their weaknesses. Some people have a different philosophy. They're like, hey, I'll just elevate my strengths, and make my weakness, whatever. And so there's different styles. But I mean, I think what you're talking about is, yeah, evaluation, and it's that interesting thing that it's part of that creative design process, right? Of design thinking, where you do the thing, you test it, and then you improve it, and then that's the new way. And so the ability, not everybody has the ego. The ego gets in the way, I think, of a lot of people of wanting to look at our weaknesses.
I I'm looking for what is the outcome that I want and what do I need to do to accomplish that. The everything in between of how I feel in this, if it's something that I've committed to, I'm trying to figure out how to do that and you make the appropriate sacrifices. Because if I'm being honest with you, I've seen it where I haven't done that in sports.
Yeah.
One of them, I was having a conversation with my first head coach in Cleveland. It was after the accident, and we're just catching up. And this is, where I have a different perspective in life. And I was like, I think I only maybe got 50% out of my athletic ability. And he's
Wow.
like, explain this. This makes no sense. You played at the highest levels, you contributed, second round pick, you're in the NFL. And I was like, well, I didn't run track in high school. And so had I run track, I would have been faster. So I don't really know how explosive I could have been as an athlete.
Hmm.
From understanding nutrition, this is before like everybody was into the sciences. I used to eat a baked potato pregame, and those it's healthy by most standards. Baked potatoes make me very inflamed. And so I
Hmm.
went to the game feeling very sticky and I didn't really know why. And so
Hmm.
your diet, the ability to stretch and which weight and all that stuff. And it has nothing to do with working hard. Working hard is the thing that everybody does, but it's the understanding how to work in a way where I optimize the thing that I'm doing. Because I was working hard doing other stuff. It just wasn't optimizing the areas that I needed it to. And so in
Yeah.
this world, it's how do I take that same approach of how do I close the gap on things that I have the ability to do, but I'm just not approaching it the right way. And so there's actually more of an excitement to understand those weaknesses and deal with them versus just letting them linger. And that doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight. Some things take months, some things take years, but you're starting to start to make progress in those areas.
Wow. So the other brutal and just really hard thing that you kind of went past was the ATV accident. I mean, I can't imagine. You talked to, like, there's basically, you kind of infer that there was almost like a year where you were kind of recovering, but I'm sure there was the physical recovery, but I can't imagine what the mental recovery must have been like after something like that.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about, I guess, the mental side of things. I've learned a lot about people that face disabilities being a part of that
Mm,
community. And as a person that, from a physical standpoint, there I could do almost anything I wanted to do with my body. From a mental
yeah.
standpoint, never even thought about, anything from anxiety or depression or anything like that. And then you have all that just flipped on side of his head where I think April 14th, riding an ATV 2017, and ATV crashes, lose my left hand in the process. And so you think about identity of my
Yeah.
hands essentially
Yeah.
would allow me to have a pretty cool career, and not having that thing and never getting it back. It's not like a break or I tore,
Yeah.
I'll never have it back. And so from that standpoint, it you can't not address it. I know it's a double negative, but
Yeah.
you have to deal with it because it's dealing with you and the
Mm,
physical pain, the emotional pain of truly being anxious and having night sweats and anxiety attacks and like being depressed and really being lost, if I'm honest with
mm,
you. And
hmm.
once you get to that place where you're like teetering on like rock bottom almost, you're like, I have to address this. And it just helps unlock just all the stuff,
Mm.
had 10 surgeries through the process. And so you give yourself a space to deal with whatever. And I tell people now, if you have a paper cut and it's important to you, like give it the proper attention, because without doing that, it's almost impossible to move forward. And so it took me a long time just to get ready to move forward, to do the groundwork. And it's been an evolving process where
Sure.
I would probably say in the last 18-ish months is where I've like really felt like myself, where you're
Mm.
just you're
Wow.
being more comfortable. And so these things take time. But the thing you can't do is stop. You have to move forward. If you stop, then you've done nothing to improve the situation. And these things don't go away on their own.
Did anybody inspire you? Was there any story that inspired you at that time, or learning from anybody else's story that may have been through something difficult?
You know, I love human stories.
Hmm.
And when you can and there's so many of them. There's the obviously the big names, the Dwayne Johnsons, the Kevin Harts. But then it just may be a guy like, David Pollock. You reach out to him and he's talking
Yeah.
about, what he faced when he broke his neck. Jared Wallace, who he became an
Hmm.
amputee. He's a
Yeah.
sprinter. But then even the people around you that they have things that they've overcome that nobody knows, and they're sharing these insights. And so I think you can glean perspective from anyone, and you can gain an understanding of how long it may take. Where, okay, realistically, this isn't a 2-day turnaround. It took me 3 years to come out of this. And so you
Wow.
can kind of level yourself in where you are on your journey and saying, I'm not supposed to be further along. I'm
Yeah.
right. I'm
Yeah.
supposed to be, 2 weeks out of surgery. It still sucks.
And it seems like just the way our minds work, I would imagine, fighting shame. Like sometimes feeling like, don't feel bad for yourself. Why are you still there? You should be doing this, or you should be. Should is a very tricky word, right? Like when we start, I mean, but it's like there's almost like some grace and maybe a lot of grace that you needed to give yourself in order to heal, grieve, like go through your process.
You're human. A buddy of mine, we were in the hospital and he was like, "How are you doing?" This might be a week after this thing happens. And I'm like, "I'm doing all right." And he looks at me and he's like, "How are you doing all right? You just had your hand amputated." And I just break down
Yeah.
crying. I'm like, "Oh my God, this is..."
Wow.
And you start to realize that we pretend to be tough and we pretend to have it all together. In reality, we don't. And so
Mm,
the quicker that I could get to, no, I don't have it all together. And in fact, it's going to be a while for I have it all
mm,
together. And I still don't have it all together. And so that grace that you give yourself to just be human. You
yeah.
don't have to be a superhero. You just be human. And that gives you, if you're a superhero, you can't heal. If you are human and you're making progress, then you get to the place that you want to be to and beyond. But if you're pretending to be okay, then that means you're not doing the work that you need to do.
It's something that you just mentioned too. I don't know. Did you have people that you were able to be, whether it was about the NFL change, leaving that? I mean, there's people that you sought out for advice, but do you have friends that you kind of were able to kind of go, Man, here's how I'm feeling today. It sucks. Just let me kind of vent with you, or share the hard things. I mean, did you have some years in your life, some relationships that you're able to kind of just be yourself completely with no judgment?
Yeah, some of it was unscripted, and some of it was learning too. Where my wife is going to see me, and I'm crying. Obviously, that's something that she doesn't see, and
Yeah.
it's very vulnerable. The individuals, like I just said, that you catching me in the hospital, and I want to be tough, and it's learned. I didn't necessarily learn. I, I didn't have that growing up to know how to express myself in that way, and so I've learned now to use those tools to invite people in and not pretend artificially that things are great. And I think the more that you do that, you can connect to people in a more authentic way where they know how to help you. If you have it all together, it's kind of hard to figure out how to help. But I've learned now to lean in more and express more and how to access it. But before I didn't even know how to access it because you are used to just kind of working through situations, and the harder you work, the
Mhm.
better the outcome. And it's sometimes just slowing down and saying, oh, this is a little bit different.
Yeah, and especially maybe in football and stuff, like you kind of have to suck it up and go on, and yet there's a place for that in life and doing things, and then there's also, outside of this space, as a human, as a person, it's really important that we are vulnerable and transparent about our brokenness with people. Things that we're struggling with. We need to be able to. I think there's something very important, even with our bodies and health wise, when we verbalize versus trying to store up and tight all this toxic, struggle that we're not sharing with anybody. We think we're tough keeping it in when it takes a lot more courage, and it's much healthier to be able to be sharing that with the right people in the right way.
1000%. 1000%.
Yeah. So coming out of that, I mean, that's just a lot, man. And you kind of go back, go, man, I've actually overcome a lot of challenging, difficult things. I mean, and that's not easy to do. And now I've also thought about how that translates into consulting that you do. Like, what good is it going to be if you go to a company? They're like, hey, Mohammed, we want you to come help us. And then you go, all right, let's kind of figure out where the needs are. And they're like, we don't have any needs. Like, you know what I mean? There's no helping a company that wants you to help them is not willing to tell you what their needs are, right? So it's like kind of in the same way, like you were talking about just the weaknesses and how you perform, the weaknesses that we have within us, being able to share that and being able to share the struggles and be real with people versus pretending like we've got it all figured out, because that's ego, right? And ego blocks learning and ego blocks growth. So if I'm like, hey, I got to project that I'm a certain way, and then that way, I won't be real about my weaknesses, or where I actually need help, because I want to act like I need help. Well, how are you going to get better? How are you going to grow? And there's going to be a limit to that. There's going to be a ceiling to that when you're not willing to have that authentic conversation.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of trust of, do you pass the eye test? From an education standpoint, people understand, like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, conceptually you understand this. From a real world application in sports, people say, okay, you've performed and you've had to navigate change. From a human level of understanding what people are dealing with, people can see, okay, this person's gone through a hardship. But then how you just lean in and you're human. It's very hard to get help as a leader because you're either dealing with incomplete information. People are going to tell you what you want. It's very hard to be vulnerable because who can you trust with this sensitive information? Is it going to be used against you? And so the ability to break down those barriers almost immediately, you start to just jump in it, where we're going to collaborate to getting to this outcome. You don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. But if
Yep.
we put knowledge within here and we do it in a safe way, where we're not pointing fingers at each other, but we're truly unearthing the best of what we have to offer, you start to make progress. And I think progress allows you to understand how to iterate. You can whiteboard all day, you can come up with the latest research, but how it actually lives, how it breathes, how it's implemented, how it's sustained is a completely different animal. That comes a lot of times from within the source. It doesn't come from externally. It's just helping them figure out how to find it. And when you can do that, they take more ownership of it. But if you come in there and you know everything, and you have people put the guards up because the environment doesn't allow them to be safe and vulnerable, it's a recipe for disaster. It's a
Yeah.
You come in and you're human, and you're able to kind of help people through these challenges in a real, authentic, empathetic way while empowering them. It lends itself to pretty cool outcomes.
So tell me about the Harvard experience. That sounded like a pretty fun thing to be involved in.
Yeah, so I had a guy ask me. He was a private equity guy, and he was acquiring a company. He was trying to figure out, through this change, how do I make sure that it's integrated well from a human capital standpoint? How my employees are going to receive it, how they're going to implement the strategy. And it wasn't overly complex. They weren't big companies. And he asked me a really fascinating question. He was like, "Are you qualified to do this work?" And I was like, "I've never really been asked that before. This is what I'm thinking." And he's seeing this athlete with what he perceived as a cool backstory, but he wanted to know, could I do the work? And so once again, you're trying to understand, what are my weaknesses? How do I solve for them? And so started looking around and didn't really know what I wanted to do or how to solve that. And as I looked, there's a professor up at Harvard, Anita Elbasay, that says, "Hey, HBS has our version of the executive MBA, about 10, 11 months, depending on how long it takes you. Would you be interested in exploring it?" And so started to explore it. And it's something that gave me the confidence to go through, and you're understanding accounting, you're understanding strategy, you're understanding operations. And that's not to say that you're an expert in it, but you understand when you're going in these situations, the 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 context of how people make decisions.
Yeah.
Like certain
Yeah.
things, they have a cost to it. There's, you can't do everything. It's not pie in the sky. And so that was great to be able to get the I guess the technical knowledge. But then my cohort had 100 and let's say 140 people from maybe 50 countries, 40,
Wow.
45, 50 countries, somewhere in there. And you're learning these perspectives from around the world of how people think in Hong Kong, how people think in Sao Paulo, how people think in Bolivia and London and Johannesburg. And it's ways that we would never think here in America, just because we don't have the context
Culturally.
culturally. And it's
Yeah.
just brilliance. And so a lot of my work now is I'm looking to try to understand how to solve these solutions. Is I may reach out to a friend that's in a different part of the world and say, "Hey, what's your perspective on this? How are y'all tackling this?" And you realize that they've streamlined things in ways that are so simple that it just hasn't been adopted here. And that's the fun part of understanding the business world a lot more, while understanding how people function around the world and all their nuances and intersectionalities. It's just, really rich and beautiful.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So going from work into other aspects of life, what are some of the things that drive you in life, even outside of work? Like what are some of your passions, or some of the things that mean the most to you?
I love my family. Love them, love spending time with them, love, even at this point, making it a priority to
Yeah.
not over indexed in one area and fail in that area is important. Gotten more into just health and well-being. And a lot of that was just driven by, I took that for granted, where you're in shape and you feel good. Being on this side of it's a lot more difficult. And in having my body just need to be in the best shape, just in case I don't have a desire to have any more surgeries. But if I do, having it well. And then I think just understanding who I am as an individual. I don't think we spend enough time understanding what we like, what we don't like, where we want to be, and not being on autopilot, where we're just kind of going however the current blows us, but like truly being intentional of how we spend our time and how we make decisions. And so that's kind of, love my family, love staying in shape, love my loved ones, and just spending quality time with them. You know,
So how's that reflected in your routines? Like I know there's travel and there's different things going on, but like what's kind of a week in Atlanta look like for you?
my days are pretty structured if I'm in town, where you probably wake up 6:30 ish, get ready, take my daughter to school. If I don't have a morning breakfast meeting, I'm responding to emails, reading to see what's going on in the world, then jumping to whatever client work is needed. Try to be very tight and I'm looking at like my to-do list. I'm checking off the big ticket items for the day, probably whatever the top three things are. That way I'm
Yeah.
efficient with time. The back half of my day is planned just, understanding how to approach things differently, either designing something, building something that a client needs to deliver, or tweaking something that's already been delivered. Trying to get home by 5:15, 5:30 at the latest.
Hmm.
Want to do the bedtime routine. Once my daughter goes down, then I'll go into the gym. Not as consistent with that as I need to, but working on it. And it depends on the day. I try not to be up too late, more than 3 days a week. And so some nights you're up until, very late. But on
Yeah.
an ideal night, I'm asleep 10-ish,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I
It's a
get
good
up,
8 hours, 10 to 6. You're doing all right. You're doing all right.
doing all right.
Have you changed anything in your routines? Is there any rhythms that you've changed, or rhythms that you found work for you? I mean, so much of what we do in life obviously is with our time. So it's like how we get the most out of that with also having healthy rhythm. It's not about optimizing everything. I mean, there's about rhythms, and some of that's downtime, and some of that's, the different aspects of our life. And there may not be balance. I mean, I like to use the word harmony,
Mhm.
in that I don't think it's 25, 25, 25, 25, across all categories. But there are certain things that if I'm not doing in one area, I know I'm out of balance. They're like guardrails or posts along the way.
I need structure, and this comes from sports, where when you're working out, when you're meeting, when you're practicing. And so if I'm in town, the front half of the day is more the responding to stuff, the reading to stuff. The second half of the day is more deep thinking, where
Mm,
I don't want to be distracted. I'm not having meetings, all that good stuff. If I can. Now, obviously things come up, but I'm going off of that template, and I'm looking at it every day of, this is what's going on, this is what's top of mind. To conclude the day, I'm trying to organize and list so that whenever I come into office the next day, I can, hit the ground running. And that structure is just very good for me, because if not, you just do a lot of low quality, not high priority type low priority type
yeah.
thing. You can become more busy than effective.
Yeah, and it's also interesting with different styles. I think probably like different personality styles or the way you're built. Sounds like you've in this journey, probably, Georgia, through the journey into the NFL while you were in the NFL. On the other side, I don't, personality tests. When you talk about learning yourself, there's over time paying attention to yourself, right, and have some downtime when you're able to reflect and read and pray and kind of think about it, learn what you like, learn what you don't like, learn what time of day you work. But were there some personality tests along the way, or anything that somebody said that taught you something about yourself? Like, we learn sometimes more about ourselves from other people because we're used to ourselves. So that feedback from others can be really revealing in terms of who we are that we didn't even realize.
I I try to listen. Yes, I've done personality tests. I don't remember like all the answers from them.
Yeah, sure.
Um, but I try to take feedback. I try to take understanding. I can be hard headed. That's like the charge for it mentality.
Yeah,
I try to, and I try to filter insights as to where am I trying to go. And so some things
yeah,
I just don't know, and then certain things I will challenge. And I'm challenging more from a debate standpoint to understanding, why do you see it this way? Not necessarily do I think you're right or wrong, but
yeah,
I want to get your full thoughts fleshed out and kind of ping pong this thing back and forth. And then I'll just kind of putter on it to figure out, okay, what can I extract from this that makes me a better version of myself? And that's probably all of life. And then trying to be accountable to the actions, once again, of where I think in sports I didn't get all of the athleticism that I couldn't have got, and then that
yeah,
was my doing of just not doing certain things. And so what are the areas that aren't moving in the way that I think that they should move? Let me sit, let me understand, let me ask questions around, where should I be spending time, how do I streamline this? And you just pick up insights, like, how do I grow, essentially.
yeah. It's interesting too on our journey. Sometimes we learn just in the doing. There's a saying that you do say yes a lot more early on, and then say no a lot more later on to focus. So say yes to get exposure, no to kind of focus and spend more time in your highest best use and your highest unique ability.
To that note, I realized that I got spread thin points, and now I won't dismiss a person, but I'll hear it and say, "Hey, I'm not the best person for this," or, I don't have the capacity for this, and try to help them find that thing versus committing to something and then
Mm.
you have to honor that commitment and you're swamped and I've been burnt out because of that. So now it's hey, I really want to help you, but that doesn't mean me physically doing the thing to help, and just kind of streamlining. These are the things I'll put my effort to. These are the things that I'll allocate this amount of time to. But in trying to be everywhere all the time, do too many things early on, I just realized that yes, you want to be as helpful as possible, but it's just not realistic that you have the capacity to do everything.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's really good. What's been the role of money in your life? I mean, what tips and what has helped you? What systems have helped you? What mental framework in terms of approaching finances? What's been helpful to you on your journey?
It's learning the value of money. If I'm honest, it's coming into money at a young age. You don't understand, like, it's a tool. It provides access. It provides confusion. It provides opportunity. It's a lot of everything. And so I think now is just understanding how to be a good steward of it, how to make wise decisions, how to invest, how to invest in self, invest in other things,
Mhm.
uh, how to hopefully drive impact with it. There's certain times you can put your resources and it helps someone else on their journey. And so I think it's the understanding of what it is now as I've gotten older in life, and not just the having it and piling it to have more and pile more, but what does it do? I think we've been fortunate that we're in a position where we've gotten a chance to be able to access it, and
Mhm.
not everyone has that opportunity. So just trying to be a good steward of it and generate it, not just for self, but hopefully to have impact.
Communication between you and Kelly, y'all get on the same page pretty quick, or y'all kind of got to wrestle with each other a little bit to kind of get to agreement?
She's actually more the finance mind. Like, she's way, way, way more the finance mind. She studied econ at Georgia, and so I should probably actually listen to her a lot more than I do.
Now all you got to do is correct that weakness, Mo. Now you know your weakness. Now you just got to go correct it.
Yeah, she's the brains of the whole operation.
What have been a couple of the ideas that really helped you in your marriage? What have been some keys, for you guys?
We just hit 10 years, and
Congrats, man.
it's it's learning. It's learning. I don't. It's just learning. Like taking accountability as a husband, as a leader, and trying to honor your marriage, honor your wife, and it's just learning how to be as I've gotten older. So that's asking for advice from other married people, asking for advice from Kelly. Hey, what can I do better? But looking internally once again, where am I spending my time? Am I, you know, I'm physically present, but is my mind somewhere else?
Yeah.
I'm carving out for family time, for marriage, and I think just learning how to be better, and what kind of like just being committed. I think that's like such
Mm,
a in the generation that we're in now. It's like everybody's just kind of all over the place, and they start somewhere and then they go somewhere else and they do something else, and just kind of being committed and trying to be better at the
mm.
commit, and enjoying the process along the way.
What about being a father? What's kind of been helpful to you there?
It's what's really fascinating about that is that when you like really think about it, you bring this child in the world that
Yeah.
they didn't like choose to be here or anything like that. Like when you really think about it, and our daughter's 4, and just trying to help her become whoever she wants to be, not like get in the way of that,
Yeah.
but also like embracing being a parent of the when you don't sleep, when you are trying to help your child continue to develop, And once again, taking the same approach of learning, how do I do this? I don't know. Like, I've never been married before. I've never been a dad before. And so all this is new. And even if you have experience at it, I haven't been a dad to a 4-year-old, to a 5-year-old, to a 6-year-old, to a 7-year-old, to whatever, haven't been married for 11, 12, 13, 14 years. There's always new things to learn and people evolve. And so it's the understanding that this is an area that you continue to develop in as well. And if you leave it to autopilot, bad things happen.
Man, so our oldest is 21, and
Mhm.
I'm still learning. The things that I've learned in the last few months, I'm like, that's what's interesting too. I don't know if you've had this experience, but the things that you're learning now in life that you haven't known before now, even though you've lived a long time, and now you're learning them. I'm like, man, I don't know. I guess sometimes they may just be, hey, you just had a blind spot and it got uncovered, but sometimes it can be really profound, next level kind of things that you're learning. I don't know. It's kind of a combination, probably like, come on, you knucklehead, how did you miss that? On something, and then something else might be, man, that's really nuanced kind of a detail that we're learning. And so I don't know, man. One of my most recent things was parent to 20, but she's 21 now, so I guess it's parent to 21. Which is when they're 15 and 16, and you don't know anything or whatever, like just focus on the relationship. There's a great counsel in that when they, for a while you're directing them, and then there's a point where it turns, depends on the child, but let's just say roughly 11, 12, 13, 14 range, to where you become more of an advisor versus a director, maybe more of a coach, and then eventually maybe more of a parent friend later in life. But when they do, trying to turn from the idea of, hey, you've got a table of counselors around it, the people that you want to speak into your life. Now, we hope that you're at the end of it with God and y'all are making decisions together. And what I'm asking is, when I say something now during that transition, and 90% of the time, I might reserve a little bit, but most of the time it's not, you need to go do what I say. But I do want a place at the table to be able to provide counsel and ideas to somebody that loves you and cares about you. But I also want you to receive it, but not see it as a directive.
Mhm.
And that's a hard shift to make. And usually there's a lot of friction between the kids starting to feel that, and the parent maybe hasn't, they're still in directing mode. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And that was a really important shift when I realized, and probably got counsel on that. That was kind of an important shift to make. And it's also emphasis on the relationship. So it's the important to be, I want to be in a relationship, or do I want to be right?
Mhm.
Right. You know, and it's like, no, I care more about the relationship. And it's interesting that sometimes when we care more about the relationship, then we'll actually get more opportunities along the way to be asked and to be able to speak and to be able to share. But it's just a different approach. But it's like, do you want the relationship or do you want to be right?
Yeah, but being right, when there's multiple people involved, rarely ends up well.
Well, the same thing with Kelly, right? Like, do you want to be right or do you want to be in a relationship? And you think about all the little things that happen in a marriage, like how you clean, how you don't clean, how you organize. I mean, I love those little memes. It's like there's somebody always that's checking the dates on and throwing out stuff in the refrigerator, and one that seems like they just don't care. Like all those little differences all along the way, and parenting styles and money and all of this. And it's like, man, if you get wrapped up in your preferences and trying to be right and trying to have it your way and all those things, like how's this thing going to work? But if you got to learn to grow and evolve together, right?
I agree, and I'm learning. There's a guy on our street, 85 years old, and he walks the neighborhood. He's been married 50 something years, and I'm like, "Man, what's the secret?" And he's like, "You know your
Yeah.
spouse, you respond accordingly." And I'm like, what does that even mean? And you sit there and you think, and you're like, I understand, how Kelly's going to respond in a lot of situations, and if I
Mm.
can either, tee up those situations where they are in a way that she appreciates them, or when something happens, I can kind of understand how do I respond in a way that makes this the best outcome for all.
Mm.
Put opinions and thoughts at the forefront of it.
some couple of other things I've learned about it. It's like the way I communicate. Like, man, I have had to change the way I communicate. It sounds like you naturally have already got a better version of that than I
No,
did. So,
no,
but
I,
like, man, I was like, I'm feeling it now. Like that, like just recently, she was sharing about something that was really, really bothering her in that day, and I kind of was fixing it. But then I was like, I'm sorry. I realized I jumped to fixing it when, I just need to be here and kind of understand that, first of all, do kind of emote with you, right? Like just receive what you're saying and be in that with you before I start trying to fix it. And sometimes asking, hey, after some of that, do you mind if I share some ideas, versus like just starting it, like you just learn, hopefully, slowly, probably me more slowly than others, but that's one. The other one is the power of being kind. So they say one of the greatest indicators of a relationship, any relationship that's going the wrong direction, is the tone and the facial expressions that you use, right? If somebody like that you've worked with was on a team, or maybe when you and Kelly were getting into it with like the tone, like if somebody was watching, they didn't hear anything, they could see, right? And it's like, how do you pick up the phone? How do you come into the house? And like all these little things, the power of being kind. So if I can be kind, it creates an environment, and we're both working on being kind. If that happens, we're creating an environment where just good things are more likely to happen. More appreciation is likely to happen. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, for sure. That's a good one. That's a good one right there.
So I don't know, man. It's just that, but I do. I think what you're sharing is just an idea of work and life and different roles of lifelong learner. Like, I mean, and there's so much to think about as in terms of a journey versus a destination, right? I
Mhm.
don't know if that resonates with you or you think about it that way.
It is. It like we don't know. I mean, no one knows how their story is going to unfold. You
Mm,
know directionally this is where I'm trying to head, but there's always detours on the road. There's always things that you stop, get gas. You stop and develop, stop and work on yourself, stop and
mm,
figure this thing out, and just being honest with yourself, not like taking ownership of God's given me this ability. I'm heading in this direction. How do I make the most of it? Um, and that doesn't mean it's the same for everyone. It's what is, am I content in continuing to develop to maximize my individual potential? Where that lends me, I don't know. But if I do that, I should be content
mm,
and really happy with that outcome. And that's
mm.
what I'm focused on right now. God's given me, you know, so many cool things that I'm appreciative of and so many lessons that I've learned. And I think so many challenges that continue to, as you get out of it, serve as resilience to continue to push through certain things. And the combination of all those things, I think, as you develop more and more, continues to equip you with what you need to succeed on your journey in all of life.
It's what the statement I think resonates with what you're saying for me is what we have is God's gift to us, and what we do with it is our gift to Him.
One thousand
You
percent.
know, and it's also and the idea of whatever hand you're dealt in life, and this kind of has a double meaning for you, right? Whatever hand you're dealt in life, play it to the best of your ability. Play it as if you're the one that was supposed to play this hand. And it's kind of like sitting at that card table. Best thing you can do with that each hand is play it to the best of your ability. And there's always going to be comparisons, right? And there's always going to be challenges, and there's always going to be difficult things. And people want to compare challenges, right? And we talked about some of yours, and it's like we all have them. Sometimes they're more visible than not, but we all have them, and we want to compare. But like everybody's got challenges, and you may think that everybody's got to figure it out, or everybody has it easy, or this person has it easy. But I guarantee you, almost every single time they've got challenges you had no idea about if you kind of really got in there and learned their story.
Yeah, yeah. And we're in this, individual game of life. And if you're still alive, you still get a chance to play it and compete and win it. And so rather than focusing on all the external noise, you channel inward and figure out, what am I going to do to make the most of my journey and hopefully add a lot of value back into the world, not just for myself, but everything that's around me.
Tell me about your faith. Like what I mean, I've talked about this a good bit And I know that God means a lot to you, but share about like the journey of faith that you've had.
It's really fascinating because my name's Mohammed, and so people don't actually know where I come into this world.
Right, right.
It, it creates a really interesting opportunity to have conversation and share, whether it's with someone who's
Mm,
Christian that doesn't know I'm Christian, with someone who's Muslim that thinks I'm Muslim and doesn't know I'm Christian, and just try to love. I think that's the one of the highest commandments is just
yeah.
ability to love. Love God, love your neighbor, and so I hopefully can continue to model those things out of I have known God for a long time and just continue to grow closer. And I think the challenges of questioning and trying to wrestle with why God continues to bring me closer to greater understanding, greater trust. And it's not perfect, but I think it's a opportunity just to continue to dive deeper and understand and sort out just what is my purpose here while I'm here. And so it's fascinating. I actually took a religion class my sophomore year at Georgia just to get a holistic understanding of, as a Christian, how does our faith map on to other faiths? How do we live in relationship to how everyone else is living? And just trying to, hopefully have others see God, through how I live my life and let him do the rest.
The times that you went through that were most difficult were those times that you kind of felt away from God. I mean, obviously there was that wrestling. Those moments were absolutely there. I mean, when you go through that, but were they looking back on them? Were there also times that you grew spiritually, or what was?
For sure, spiritual growth. And it's not a why me. I mean, if you have faith, you gotta have faith. You can't, it's not a convenient thing, and sometimes it's challenging. I think that, I tell like God has a funny sense of humor. Sometimes we're not in on a joke, but it's God has a funny sense of humor, and so you question, you wrestle, but even in that you- you're with God because you're it's not you're questioning the surgeon, you're questioning the weather, you're like literally in there with God, and it's the trying to understand, and it's the exploration, and you're in scripture, you're listening to podcasts, you're listening to sermons, just to say, how are you trying to speak to me in this moment? And the reason I think why it takes time, because I wouldn't have foreseen, all the things that have come out of life being orchestrated. But it's truly divine intervention. So you just got to give these things some time to truly shake out, of what God is doing. And sometimes it has nothing to do with you. Sometimes it's for someone
Yeah,
else, letting God be God. And while it's not always easy, not getting in the way to being our flesh and being a human spirit and going against it.
yeah, man. It's there's a series on circumstantial faith. Like, do
Mhm.
we have faith in God or do we have faith in our circumstances? So sometimes it's easy when I go through life going, "Hey God, I'm going to follow you as long as I get, I'm in a good relationship, money's coming in, got a good job, enjoying life." But but then we don't say that out loud, but the way that we can react to some of the hardest things that happen, and they can be super hard and challenging. But is our faith in our circumstances when things are going well, and or is it in God, regardless, because that's where true faith comes in, right?
Yeah, it's not external. It's a lot of it is internal. The external, whether you have or don't have, isn't like a sign of blessing or lack of. A lot of it is just your internal, peace and what you feel God is doing in your life, and that not in comparison to anything, and it's not in comparison to what you have or don't have.
My sense with you, I don't know if somebody's told you this or if you feel this yourself. My sense with you is that you are you are very content. Not that you're not striving to get better, not that you're not trying to improve, but you I don't know, just in my interactions with you, I just feel like you seem to be a person who's content with where they are. They're content with this, what they have. And not that you're not striving, and not that you don't want, to grow in these other things. But I don't know, is that something you see in yourself? Contentment?
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't grow up with a lot. And then when I got a lot, I didn't really want to do a lot with it. And
Yeah.
it's not a and that's why I keep saying it's not a possession thing. Like there's been things that I bought where, you get really charged up about getting them and then, 15 minutes later you're like, okay. It's just the quality of a life lived. And
Mm.
that's why I say money is a tool. It's a tool not just for you, but for other people. So if continue to earn more, it's not like it's going to fundamentally change where I feel or how I feel or even what I do. But there's a desire to live a purposeful life and like really be competitive with God's given me these abilities. I want to put value into the world. Obviously, with that comes, financial rewards, but those financial rewards aren't going to like make me
Mm.
over index one way or the
Mm.
other. So it's
Mm.
the joy to be able to do work at a high level, the joy to be able to live at a high level. But once again, those circumstances don't really move me one way or another. The things that move me is just quality time spent with people I care about, people I love,
Mm.
moments where I'm at peace. Like those are the things that actually are like what charge me up more than.
Yeah, that must be what it is. I see that, the quality time and things that give you peace. We say that money's a tool, a test, and a testimony. So it's a tool to be used for whatever God wants in our lives. It's a test to see how we'll do with what He's given us, and all of our things are that way. Our gifts, our relationships are all. This is true of all of it, and it's a testimony. How we use these is a witness, that we'll have one way or another. And it's, yeah, there's those three things. And so how we do with what's been given to us is a really big deal. So if you had to say kind of what is winning for you in life, what is success in your terms, and in Mo Mass's terms, what does success look like at the end of the day, when all said and done? What do you want your life to have been about?
Oof. It depends what area. Relationally, someone that loved and created value back into the world. And then the competitor in me is the things that I choose to do that I do them at the highest levels and not compromising on that.
Mm.
I don't sacrifice in that area at
Mm.
all. So you asked me the question, when am I competitive and when I'm not? When I'm
Yeah.
in relationship with people I care about and love, it is, just a desire to see good things happen, no ego to win. If I'm supposed to be on and it's in a working capacity, a volunteer capacity, nonprofit, philanthropic capacity, I'm on and I'm going to go. And so it's a switch that changes from like being very mellow, being very chill, loving to
Mm.
all right, now it's time to go like hunt. And it's a love on both ends.
I love it. So I love also because no matter what our job is to add value. And the question is, do we all know what adding value looks like in our roles? And there's different levels of learning in life. You kind of know that on surface level, but if you know a deeper level and then a deeper level and then a nuance level, right? Like take serving food. Like McDonald's and Chick-fil-A both think they're there to serve food, right? But how they do it, it's probably say at Chick-fil-A most of the time, it's at a deeper level, more service and nuanced ways that they've gotten better and better at adding value through the quality, through the service, through the speed, whatever those things are. So it's like, do we know in our work how we add value? And then do we know how we add more value than we're being paid? And so what are those things that go beyond to add more value? I love that whole idea of we're here to add value. And there's lots of different ways with our giftedness, where we are, with the people, the roles and the relationships and the communities that we're in, the nonprofit work, the generosity that we can be called to do, both with our time, money, talents, whatever. And yeah, I think Steve Jobs called it making a dent in the universe, but I think we're all called to have a voice. We're all kind of have our own gifting that I think God wants us to use those in different ways. So if somebody wants to connect with you at Vessel, what would be a scenario, and tell us why the name Vessel?
So Vessel, when I was coming up with the name, someone said, "What is personal to you?" And so I went back to the core of who I am. I'm Liberian. Liberia registers the second most ships in the world.
Wow.
Fun
Okay.
fact.
Yeah.
Uh, and when you think of organizations, big complex organizations, you think of ships. They're transporting goods all around the world, and there's precious cargo in them, and they're relying on them to get from one area to the next area safely. But then, because these things are so big and massive, they're not just supposed to be stationary at whatever port. They're supposed to keep going back and forth. And so when I think about companies going through change and they have precious cargo, whether it's people, IP, services, goods, they're trying to get these things to and from safely, and they're needing somebody to help them through. So hopefully, we're
Love it.
the that helps organizations when they're going through change. They're trying to simplify that process from the top down, create alignment. And sometimes they don't always know how to do it. So hopefully we can fill in that gap.
I think with humans involved, you're always going to have a job, Mo.
I find that all of these systems have some type of complexity in there that they're trying to simplify. So I love it.
And that's VESSOL vessel.
VESSOL. Correct.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So close with this. Any favorite things, any favorite books, movies, podcasts, anything that's impacted you or that you just have had a lot of fun with?
Man, I'm a big podcaster. I'm all over the place right now though.
Yeah.
Anything. I'm on the Acquired. I think Kevin Hart has a Gold Mines. Trevor Noah just came out with one that seems like it's going to be very promising and really
Mm.
good. First few episodes. Books. Oh, man, Subtract is a good book. I think the author's name is Lodi. I think his name is. I love Andreessen's books. Not Andreessen's, but Ben Horowitz. Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Yep.
Uh, Creative Genius by Linda Hill, Blockbusters, Anita Elbersay. So it's all over the place. I'm constantly just reading or listening to something. And I don't watch a lot of TV, but I do love, firsthand insights from human stories.
Yeah. Well, there's some names and titles in there that I'm gonna have to go check out because there's some authors in there I haven't even heard of. So,
Cool, cool. I'll send you some good stuff.
man, that'd be incredible. Well, hey, buddy, thanks for taking time today. Appreciate the life you're living, the intentionality with which you're living it, the way the faith is kind of at the soul core of who you are, and how that's flowing into your work, it's flowing into your family, it's flowing into everything that you do. So it's cool to see the way that God has gifted you, even amidst the challenges, and how you're trying to live that out.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Keep going. This is going to impact a lot of people. And stay in shape. I'll do my best by the spring, and I'll stop running away from you on the tennis courts.
Pickleball courts now, man. Pickleball courts.
Pickleball, pickleball. All right, cool.
Yeah, we'll get you out there before too long.
All right.
All right. Thanks for joining, Mo.
All right, take it easy.